D. D is an Autism Ambassador at Autism Canada, an advocate for and from the autistic community. Dee's presentation today is entitled We Belong, Self-advocacy for people on the autism spectrum. Those with ASD don't fit into the expected mold of society. Many see us as victims, but we don't have to live a life of despair. For those on the spectrum, self-advocacy is an essential life skill. We cannot passively wait for the system to change. We must have the confidence to ask for the aid we need, if that includes applying for benefits or asking employers for accommodations.
Dit ambassadeur d'Autisme Canada et défenseur de l'autisme et qui fait partie de la communauté autiste. Nous en faisons partie, défense des droits des personnes autistes. Les personnes autistes ne correspondent pas au moule de la société auquel s'attend. Beaucoup nous voient comme des victimes, mais nous n'avons pas à vivre une vie de désespoir. Pour ceux et celles qui sont sur le spectre, la défense des droits est une compétence essentielle de la vie. Nous ne pouvons pas attendre passivement que le système change. Nous devons avoir la confiance nécessaire pour demander l'aide dont nous avons besoin. Si cela comprend le fait de demander des prestations ou de demander à des employeurs et employeurs de nous fournir des accommodements.
Hello, Dee. Thank you very much for being one of our presenters at Awesome. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to hearing about you and self-advocacy. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
My name is Dee, and I'm doing a presentation today on self-advocacy, which is taken from the presentation I did from the Toronto Catholic School Board. When I was younger, I noticed that I had a lot of problems. I didn't have the same kind of interests. I had a smaller number of people that I was able to emotionally connect to. I was also the victim of bullying as a result of that. Also, I did very poorly academically at the time, and that was a problem. I had a lot of trouble putting together how to read and write. It was not something that came intuitively for me. I had a lot of trouble maintaining focus and attention. As a result, the school I went to sent me to have my IQ tested, and the results came back. At first, it came back indicative of high intelligence, but they didn't give a score.
You're reflecting a feeling that a lot of us had who were not diagnosed as children of not fitting in. IQ tests are not built for autistics, I don't think.
No, they aren't.
Yeah. When you went to high school, or when you got older in your childhood, things must have got better for you?
Actually, they did. Part of the reason was because the pieces came together for reading, writing, and some of the problems I might have had with math and other areas. Reflecting back, I think that part of the problem there has to do with my memory function not working the same as other people. Most people have very, very good short-term memory, poor long-term memory. My long-term memory tends to be very good, but the problem is that getting stuff to go into my long-term memory, there's a very the information is very filtered. I'll put it that way. And also, not just that, but it causes me a lot of problems with executive functioning, keeping stuff in my head. It causes me problems with things like cooking, doing tasks like cooking, cleaning, and whatever that are trivial, where I have to keep in my head where I was at. That function doesn't work as well for me as other people, and it's very, very frustrating. It was just a matter of getting everything I needed into my long-term memory, because my mind was designed for more like how programming languages work, where everything's very logical, predictable, and you can very easily recognize what's happening and construct new code without having to memorize all kinds of the eccentricities of the language. You don't have to remember all of these exceptions and stuff. And I was able to excel now in school.
Yeah. So
And
actually, and what you're pointing out,
is that
we're not the problem. We are different, and the system doesn't or didn't when you were going through school, didn't fit for you. Okay, so you've mentioned computer science sometimes, and I know that's a strength for you. When did you discover that?
I would say around the time that I went to high school was when I got interested in programming, and the interest became more and more intense. When I was in high school, because I had by that time mastered the basics, I was able to now perform, and also they I was able to now have some say, not as much as I'd have liked, but some say in what subjects I take. And that meant that I had more connections to other people that were similar to me and more compatible to me. And it meant that I was less bullied. I had a better, broader friend base, more people who were able to accept my eccentricities. And yeah, the programming was something that I very greatly connected to, and I think it's because it has a lot of rules and patterns that are very compatible with the way my brain works.
So when you discovered computer science, you also found your tribe in a very extended
Yeah,
way. And
I did. I found actually a lot of, you would be shocked at how good some high school students are at programming. I'm still to this day amazed by the programming talent that's out there, not just myself, but other high school students at such a young age. The people who get it, they really get it, and it is a community where there's a lot of connection, and also connection, interests in science, and interests in visual arts, and whatever. The areas where I found it harder to connect when I was younger, I was now in situations more where there were people who were more similar in those interests.
yeah.
And
So okay, so you did well at computer science in high school, and you went to study that at university, didn't you?
that's correct. It really changed the way that I thought to go to Ryerson.
Okay, so after university, you graduated, and everything was great, right?
After I graduated from university, it was a disaster. And part of the reason was that I hadn't dealt with a lot of the mental health issues that
Hmm.
I've been dealing with, and autism was one of them, but also depression, extreme anxiety. And it wasn't until I struggled through for another 10 or so years, having constant psychotherapy, I was finally officially given the obvious diagnosis, which was autism spectrum disorder.
Now, you told me earlier that you were chosen to go to Microsoft, which is pretty impressive.
Yes, I call that both my most exciting achievement and that simultaneously my most disappointing outcome. This was about 5 years ago now. I was the first non-US citizen to go through the evaluation, the week-long evaluation at Microsoft headquarters for their hiring initiative. I had already at that point gotten accommodated jobs through specialist turn at SAP and Medisystem,
Hmm.
and Microsoft was very interested. I was also became one of the very few people to have received two job interviews from Microsoft. Usually, if you're rejected, then that's final. But because I was rejected through a neurotypical process, and I asked them to consider me through the autistic process, they did make an exception and gave me a second chance, a second and the very last chance. It was a once in a lifetime experience that you can't put on your bucket list. And like I say, I feel very privileged and proud to have had that experience.
So tell like what's involved in that? Like did you
Uh,
fly out to Redmond? And I'm pointing to the southward because it's just to the south of me.
that's true, actually. Yeah, when I applied, interestingly enough, I was still living in Vancouver. I went back to Toronto to take the placement at Medisystem, so I had to fly all the way back out to Seattle. They paid for it, which is
Hmm.
amazing. They paid for the flight, they paid for the hotel. I was in with this great group of people, the best in the world, autistic programmers. Unlike any group of people I've ever seen, they were all from the United States, but uh, these were really, really high powered computer scientists from all around the US, which is 10 times the population of Canada.
Yeah.
So I was in a completely different ballpark than I was used to from.
And so did they take you around campus? Like,
Uh, there we had limited access. There was one
mm,
particular building which was actually that's the visitor center. It's the
hmm.
same one. If you go as a visitor, they'll let you into one building only. And that was the building where we did most of the assessment. But there were a couple of other buildings. One was a cafeteria building. They had a cafeteria, a building just dedicated to restaurants. And there was another building where we did the actual interviews because they broke it down into two parts. One was the autistic assessment, and the other part was that we actually did, I think we each did 3 interviews for jobs. And those interviews happened in highly secured buildings where the jobs would be. So again, I had to be led into those buildings. I was only allowed a very brief period of time to do the interview and then leave.
You had an interview with Microsoft and failed, and then you asked again to be reconsidered because of your neurodiversity. And so that's a really good sign of self-advocacy, isn't it?
Yeah, I would like to think that I've been above average in self-advocacy. I think maybe there's a cultural shift towards that. There are tools in our society that allow people to self-advocate.
In your earlier presentation, you had some points about self-advocacy, and I'd just like to read some of them and then maybe get you to explain. Examine your interests and strengths. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, an analogy that I often like to make is the idea of an investment portfolio. Uh, you wouldn't want to invest in an investment portfolio where money was taken out of the high performing stocks and put into the low performing stocks to ensure that all of the stocks have the same return. That would be very counterproductive. It's better to focus on the areas where you're strong and able to make the most progress.
And then the other
Yes.
one is being aware of weaknesses.
Well, I don't think we should focus on our weaknesses. I don't think, for instance, we should spend all our time doing something which we have no interest in and no aptitude in, just because those are common things. But
And again, you're bringing up, so your third point was understanding your learning style. And you definitely have a specific learning style, you think?
well, I think that I learn by doing. I think a
Hmm.
lot of people learn by doing. Um, sitting there and listening to a lecture, especially if it's not on something you're interested in, is just going to go in one ear and out the other.
But there's also like, so for instance, the doing learning style is what's called a kinesthetic learning style. Funnily
Okay.
enough, I'm completely okay with the lecture. I can take things in orally. My learning style is oral and writing, um, which is really funny for a musician. Like I don't learn by doing so much. And again, what we're pointing out here is if you look at the four basic styles, the doing, watching, reading, and hearing, again, we all have a strength in those areas, and being aware of that's really super important, I think, for advocacy, because you don't want for instance, you say you learn from doing, so watching 6 or 7 videos about a certain subject is probably not going to be helping you particularly. You need to do something in that subject area to learn it.
Yeah, I think I mean, for programming, that's true. If I look at a lecture and look at, like, quite often in computer science, you would watch the professor program, which is interesting, but I don't learn how to program from watching the professor program, but if I go in on my own and try to write a program, um, it may or may not be based on what the professor wrote, but it's going to be writing the program myself that I learn. If I just watch the lectures and don't do the code myself, the fact of the matter is it would just disappear from my mind. It would never enter my long-term memory if I didn't actually do the exercise myself.
You need to get on the keyboard, and you need to type it, you need to compile it, you need to run it, you need to see what's going on. The advocacy aspect of this is recognizing where your strength is. And actually, you've also written "Believe in Yourself," which I think.
Yes, I think it's important because a lot of people in society are gaslit by being told that um, if you failed, you just didn't try hard enough. If you're poor, you just didn't work hard enough. But in reality, they can say that because they don't know how hard you work, and nobody but you knows how hard you work. You have to believe in yourself and believe that, that you are trying as hard as you can. I mean, if you aren't, then you should, but when you try as hard as you can. And
you've just talked about believing yourself, and that's a really important part of advocacy. I'd like to now move to accommodations for yourself and in the workplace. How do you ask for accommodation?
Well, asking for accommodation is not easy. It's very embarrassing and also very necessary, both in academia and in the workplace. Well, you do not have to, under the law, disclose any medical condition to your employer or school or whatever if you don't wish to. So this is something you would have to contact your HR department about. If you have a union, you might be able to do it through the union. But the option that I have used, which is another option, that's to use a recruiter that specializes in placing people with disabilities because they streamline the process for you. If you're able to do that, that's what you want to. That's what I suggest doing.
The important thing I think that I get from all this, from an advocacy point of view, is that those of us who are autistic, and that recognition that we need accommodations, it's important for us to ask for them, not because we are not capable, but because the system often doesn't work for our brains. And what about, is asking for a benefit, like a government benefit, like a tax benefit, do you think that's part of advocacy as well?
I absolutely suggest applying for every benefit that you qualify for. Some people find that embarrassing. There is a social stigma attached to it, unfortunately. But
is there a positive aspect to it? Is it something about getting a benefit that you think is a positive thing to you as a autistic person?
Well, absolutely. The most obvious benefit is that you have more money, disability status with Revenue Canada, in which case you can qualify for a lower tax rate, which is helpful. It would allow you to contribute to a special type of disability savings bond program that's not available to other people. If you apply for provincial income support benefits, they do tend to come with certain health insurance that may not be covered for other people, such as vision care and dental care, which is very valuable to me. And one of the benefits I found for myself was that being approved for provincial benefits, it legitimized my disability status And I think that changed the way that I felt about myself, the way that other people felt about me. And it was a really important change that needed to happen for me to move forward.
One of the things we need to do from an advocacy point of view is to improve the system. So can you talk about that a little bit, please?
Yes, that would be my pleasure. Actually, that's my favorite part of the presentation, which is part of the reason I left it to last. We have a privilege here in Canada that people around the world don't have. We're a strong, well-established democracy, and people have not just the right but obligation to improve the system where it's flawed. And the law allows a couple of ways in which to do that. The most important, the right to vote, which is easy. And the other thing that you should do is research which political parties want to help people like yourself. And I suggest joining a political party. And most people can volunteer for their political party, which is very important, especially during the election. Another important piece of our democracy is the duty to serve on a jury if called, that the jury system is there in order to ensure the justice system is applied fairly. By serving on a jury, you can help to ensure that every defendant's rights are protected, and jury duty is a positive thing. It's a right. I see it as both a right, a privilege, a job, and a duty. Yes, giving back, which is precisely what I'm trying to do today, and also try to do in my role as Autism Canada Advocacy Ambassador. I share my experience. I've also in the past written in the newsletter. You may have seen me, I publish under the name D, and I use the name D to preserve my anonymity because um, I feel that it makes me more empowered to talk about things. Do everything you can to give back and share your experience with others. Talk to the media, you know, do everything you can, use social media to try to create more public awareness about the problems that people like us face, because then they're going to get fixed. If they don't get attention, they're not. So
that's a good point to finish, I think, because the most important thing for me is sharing that experience and encouraging everybody to share their lived experience. Especially, we're just at the tail end now of Autism Acceptance Month, and I thank you on Autism Canada's behalf for everything you do. And finally, I'd like to thank you for the presentation today and for going through this process with me.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share my story, Bruce. I appreciate it.
Cool. Thank you very much, Dee. And we're going to have a Q&A session in a second.
Okay, looking forward to it.